بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Okay, so in this lecture we are going to do the solution of this quiz. So in this quiz we will implement a waiting queue for clients, tasks and tasks object. Okay, so first we have the different classes: person, client, task, waiting, client queue and client queuable demo provided to you. Task and client are two classes that can have objects queued into a waiting queue. Okay, task and client. In fact, a client waits in a waiting queue before it receives a service. And also a task, for example, a task in operating system or whatever, waits in a waiting queue before it gets executed. So both are queuable objects. Okay, so here we're going to create an interface queuable to capture this effect or this relation between task and client. So in this quiz, you will build a priority waiting queue using array list. This is the objective. So first of all, we're going to start by the queuable object interface. The first objective is to create an interface queuable object that does not contain any method and must be implemented by any class that can be queued in a waiting queue. Write the interface queuable object. Of course, that's pretty much straightforward. I'm going to create an interface. And does not contain any method. So what is the benefit of creating an interface like this? Is there any benefit? Or creating an interface doesn't have any method? Yes?
We can use it for other items that, to make them similar. Like they have to be this kind of thing for it to work.
Yeah, this allows later on to perform polymorphic processing. For example, we can create an array list of queuable objects, and this queuable object can be of different types. So it represents like a generic class, okay, or generic type for different queuable objects. And this is going to be clearer in the in the demo class, queuable demo class later on. Okay. Write the interface queuable object. Do not forget to modify the class client and task accordingly. So what we should do in the class client and task? Implements queuable object. Okay. And here we don't have to implement any method, but we tell the compiler that this is kind of an instance. Client is an instance of queuable object, and same thing for task queuable object. Okay, now we're going to implement the queuable interface. What it does, now we will write the interface queuable that contains two methods. One method called inqueue object OB that takes an object as parameter and does not return anything. This method, when implemented, should add the object into the waiting queue. And look here, we used object. What is object here?
The task or client.
No. Yeah, object. This is the class, the superclass of any class in Java. Any class in Java, it extends object. Okay, so when you have a class, whatever it is, it's like you write extends object. And object contains the toString method and contains several other methods. Okay, that's why every class has the toString method. It comes from the object class. It has the clone, equal, different methods in object. So here we make it as generic one. The parameter is generic, the class object. Okay. and we have the class, we have the method inQ and the method dequeue. So this will add an object into the queue, and this one will remove the object from the queue. Write the interface queuable. Also, it's simple. Write the interface. In queue object. Okay, public abstract void and same thing here with dequeue. Does it return anything? Should return the removed object from the waiting queue. Okay, it should return the removed object. Okay, and dequeue, okay, so should be like this. It returns the removed object and does not have any parameter here, because it's going to dequeue from the beginning of the queue. Okay, so now we would like to define a way on how to compare between two client objects and two task objects. Okay, so a client C1 is greater than a client C2 if the priority of C1 is greater than the priority of C2, and if equal, we're going to compare the waiting number. Or okay, if C1 waiting number is smaller than C2 waiting number. This is normal. Now, for example, if you have one queue, okay, and imagine that two customers come, one that is VIP and the other one is normal. Who's going to be served first?
VIP.
VIP first. Okay, so we check first the priority. Imagine that two VIP come at the same time. Who is going to be served first?
The one with the first order number.
Yes, the one with the smallest number. Okay, customer number
Waiting number.
or waiting number. Yes. So this is the priority we're going to implement, and for this we're going to go here, the class client, and we need also to implement what? Comparable client. And as we mentioned before, it's possible to implement more than one interface into the class. However, we cannot extend more than one class. So there is only single inheritance in Java, but you can implement several interfaces. Okay, so here we're going to implement comparable client, and of course we have to override the method. Which method? We need to override the method compare to. Public int compare to client C. Okay, what to do here? If we're going to compare the priorities, this dot get, we don't have priority here. Yeah, we didn't. Okay. Okay, I want to make get and set method for. It's not needed, but it's better. Okay, this dot get client priority dot compare C1 C dot if it is different from 0, so in this case we return the comparison. واضح؟ Else what we should do? Okay, so if the priority are different, we're going to return the comparison between this dot get client priority and واضحة دي ولا؟ Is it clear? Okay, so if this priority is bigger, it's going to be positive, otherwise negative, and when it is equal, it's 0. So when it is equal, we're going to compare waiting number. Waiting number is an int. Return this dot get waiting number minus c dot. Here we have to make the opposite. أنا قلنا إذا كان this dot get waiting number is smaller than. Okay, so in this case it must be here the opposite. So when this is smaller, it's going to return a positive value. When it is bigger, it's going to return a negative value. صح ولا؟
It says it's smaller.
Yes, here
Greater.
the waiting number is smaller. معناها we look at the difference. If this is smaller, okay, so when C1 is smaller than C2, waiting number is smaller than C2 waiting number, so the difference between C2 waiting number minus C1 waiting number must be positive. And this is why here we did it like this.
C2 like this object or C1 means C in the parameter.
نعم.
How can you know if it means C1 is this object or C2 is the object that
C1 and C2 are just for illustrating, and you have compared to. This one must be positive, okay, when the waiting number of this is smaller than the waiting number of the client in parameter here. Okay, so this is the comparison between two clients. Is it clear? واضح ولا لا؟ Okay, we will do the same thing with task. A task T1 is greater than a task T2 if T1 priority is higher than T2 priority, and if equal, we compare the ID. So we will do the same thing. Implements comparable task. And here we will override public int compare to method task T. First of all, we compare the priority. If this dot get priority dot, what is the type here? It's int, different from T dot get priority. So since they are int, I can return the difference. This dot get priority minus T dot get priority. Else return. We're going to compare the ID. This dot get ID, which is an int. Okay, and here we have to have T dot get ID minus, so because we want that get ID be smaller here to return a positive value. So this is the compare to method of the task class. So now, the waiting client queue class. The class waiting client queue implements a waiting queue for client objects. You need to complete this class to perform the following. The waiting client queue class must implement the queuable interface, so it must override the enqueue object method, okay, which should add the client object to the waiting queue defined as an array list, and the dequeue method should remove the highest priority client object from the waiting queue. Modify the waiting client queue class accordingly. Okay, so I'm going to take all of this, and now we go to the class waiting client queue. So now we have here an array list of client. So this is our client waiting queue. So it's here where we are going to store the clients according to their priority. We have a constructor. Okay, so in the constructor we have two constructors, one with argument and another one with without arguments. Okay, so let's do it ourselves. So here the waiting client queue must implement the interface queuable, and the interface queuable that we defined before has two methods, enqueue and dequeue. So we need to implement, to override these two methods. Okay, I'm going to override them. So override here and override here. So what to do here for the enqueue? What we should do? The enqueue method should add the client object to the waiting queue. Okay. So here we have waiting queue. What we should do here? This is an array list. We have to add the client to this array list. What to use here? Dot add. So we want to use dot add in the just a moment. The enqueue. Dot add object. Okay, the problem is dot add here will wait for a client, and the parameter here is of type object. What we should do here? We have first to check if the object is of type client. Okay, if OB instance of client, if it is the case, what we should do? We should downcast. Okay. So to convert to the same type, and then we will add this downcasted client into the queue. واضح? Okay? It's very simple. You just need to add, this is an array list, which is defined here. Okay, we have private array list of client, so we can only add clients to it. But the problem here, the interface, it has enqueue of object. So first of all, before adding this into the array list, I have to check whether this object is a client using instance of. If it is the case, I will do downcasting so that to convert that object into a client, and then I will add it into the array list. Voila. Okay, now about DQ. Should remove the highest priority object. Okay, so we're going to do waiting queue dot remove, and here dot remove we have to specify either an index or an object. So we need to return the highest priority object first. How to get the highest priority object? So the highest priority object is the maximum. Okay, we can use you can check it one by one, but the easiest way is to use collection dot max. Okay, we can do here client. Okay, high priority client collection dot max. And then we can remove it. Hello? So here we select the highest priority client using collection.max, and this is now possible because client is comparable. So the array list, we can use collection.max on the array list in order to extract the highest priority client. Is it clear? I don't know what. Return. Okay. And then return this client. Only 3 lines. Okay.
Like return with the same syntax with the remove.
Yeah, it's possible also. And remove is going to return. Let me check. Dot remove. It returns a boolean only if you remove with the index. If you remove with the index, yes, it returns the client. But here it's going to return. Okay. The next question now, the client queuable demo. In the class client queuable demo, you will make a polymorphic processing of queuable object, client, and task. The queue list object contains all queuable objects. Complete the missing code. Okay. Enqueue all client object into the queue list. Print the size of the elements and dequeue and display these ones. Okay. So let's go here. What is this waiting queue here? It's here, okay. So now we have an array list that is called the queue list. And you can see now this is why we have defined an interface, okay, called queuable object, is to be able to use an array list for all the different clients and tasks, all of them into one array list. Okay, so here we have an array list, and then we are going to add clients and tasks in the same array list. Enqueue all client objects into the waiting client queue. So how to do this? For every We can use a for each statement for every queuable object in queue list. Okay. Waiting client queue. What is the waiting client queue? Is it defined? You have to define it, yes. Waiting client queue, WC queue equal new okay. So now if we do the following, dot in queue, we can just do dot in queue like this. Is it possible? It's possible because inside in queue we already have instance of. Okay, we don't need to do it here. So this is just the code, very simple. And now print the size of the waiting client queue. Okay, S out. How to print the size?
Get size.
Do we have get size here?
Yeah.
Get size. Okay.
Should do down casting.
And dequeue all the client from the queue. Now we don't need here. لأنه in queue it already make the downcasting. Okay. We already have this here. And finally dequeue all the elements. Very simple. Okay. Dot dequeue. We can just make an if statement if the size is different from 0. So we don't dequeue. Or maybe here in the dequeue must be, we have to check whether the size is 0 or not. Or it's fine. In any case, okay, here we return. So just to guarantee that we only remove if the size is different from 0. Okay, that's the whole thing. Yes?
For comparator, the buckets, can we take it as interface inside the class or
For what?
comparator? Can we take it as interface or just we like?
No, comparator, you have to implement the comparator interface. Now, if I want to do a comparator here, for example, I want to do a comparator for client, I will create a class, client comparator. Okay, and here it must implement comparator interface for the client and must override the method. Which method? Compare.
But can I extend it inside the interface?
No. Okay. Compare. So here we have client C1, client C2, and then I can define any comparison criteria. Okay. For example, return C1 dot get waiting number minus C2 dot get waiting number. I want just to compare waiting numbers. For example, like this. Okay, so this is an example of comparator class. And then now if I want to use it, I can use it here, Queuable demo, in, for example, 2D queue. Okay, if I want now to use the priority based on the comparator, I can create a new client comparator. No, new client comparator here. Okay, so here it's going to be based only on the waiting number. Okay, highest priority will be the smallest waiting number. If I don't use this, it's going to use the comparable interface, which uses the priority and then the waiting number. Okay, واضح المثال؟ Okay. Bonus question, what is the order of the queuing the client object in the client queuable demo from the waiting queue? What will be the order here? So if we look at we have this client normal, this one VIP, this one normal, and this one VIP. So first of all, we're going to have the two VIP first. VIP and VIP. This one is first. So we're going to have Salah first, then Shahid, because VIP, and this is the waiting number. And then we compare the normal, Munir, and then Muhammad, in this order. Okay? Why did we create the empty interface Queuable object with no method? Okay. Now we have responded to this in the beginning in order to make polymorphic processing over client and task objects. Okay, so you can see it's very simple. Okay, tomorrow we're going to do some more exercises about generic classes as well. Okay, so it's fine for today. That's all.